Welcome. In this deep dive, we're tackling some pretty big ideas, trying to really get to the core insights.
That's the plan.
Today, it's analytical idealism, a view of reality that, well, it really flips the script on how we usually think about
It
things.
definitely does. It challenges that everyday physicalist assumption.
And specifically, we want to focus on how this framework understands uh, God, or maybe a better term, is universal consciousness.
Right, that's central to it.
Hmm.
We'll be using academic papers, some course transcripts, aiming for that college-level understanding, but keeping it clear.
Good. So analytical idealism.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness is fundamental, not matter. Can you maybe start with that core idea? The dashboard analogy often comes up here.
Yeah, the dashboard analogy is helpful. So imagine the physical world. Everything you see, touch, interact with isn't the fundamental reality itself.
Okay.
Instead, it's like a dashboard of dials. Think of a pilot's cockpit.
Yeah.
Those dials give the pilot crucial info to fly the plane, right?
Speed, altitude.
Exactly. But the dials aren't the engine or the wings or the air outside. They represent something more complex.
So the physical world is like those dials. Useful, necessary even, but just a representation.
Precisely. And in analytical idealism, what that dashboard represents, the underlying machinery, if you like, is consciousness itself, a vast universal consciousness.
Okay, let's pause there. A universal consciousness. So not just my consciousness or your consciousness, but something bigger, foundational.
Exactly. The core claim is that the bedrock of all existence, the ultimate reality, is a spatially unbound field of pure subjective experience. Phenomenal consciousness.
Wow. Okay, so how do we fit in? Our individual minds.
That's where the idea of alters comes in. Individual minds like ours are seen as arising through a process called dissociation within that universal consciousness.
Dissociation, like in psychology.
Similar concept, yes. Think of the universal consciousness as a vast ocean. Individual minds or alters are like whirlpools forming within that ocean.
So distinct centers of awareness.
Distinct centers, yes, each with its own seemingly private experience, but ultimately made of the same stuff, the water of the universal consciousness.
So my feeling of I, my subjective world, is one such alter.
That's the idea. And this also helps explain the concept of the unconscious.
How so?
Well, the unconscious could be parts of that universal consciousness that we aren't meta-conscious of experiencing without knowing we are experiencing it. Or it could be other dissociated parts, other alters or processes within the universal mind that are separate from our specific viewpoint, like other whirlpools we aren't directly connected to.
Okay, that paints a picture. It connects the individual to this, well, universal ground. Which brings us back to the main focus, God.
How does analytical idealism relate this universal consciousness to the concept of God?
It's a very direct link, actually, this universal, spatially extended subjectivity. It's seen as fundamentally analogous to what many traditions call God, or the ultimate cosmic principle.
So not necessarily a being outside the universe, but the universe's fundamental nature. Exactly. It's the source, the origin, the ground of all being. Bernardo Kastrup, a key proponent, uses the Greek term ousia, substance, fundamental reality. He argues this universal mind is the ousia of the universe.
The ground of being. So is this a personal God, like the God of Abrahamic religions, with intentions, plans?
Generally, no. That's a key distinction. It's typically not framed as a personal deity with specific intentions or a will directed at individuals in that way.
Okay.
It's more fundamental. It is the conscious reality from which everything emerges and unfolds according to its own inherent nature. Not an intervening entity, but the very fabric of existence.
That's clear. Less anthropomorphic, perhaps.
Yeah.
You mentioned historical connections earlier. Spinoza came up.
Yes, Spinoza's really interesting here. His concept of naturans, that's naturing nature in its active creative aspect, he equated this with God or substance.
The ultimate reality.
Right. And then he had naturata, nature, the world as we experience it, the manifestation. Now, people often mistakenly think Spinoza said God is the physical world, pantheism, but that's not quite right.
Oh.
He saw the physical world, naturata, as a mode or expression of the underlying divine substance, naturatus.
I see. So the physical world comes from God's substance, but isn't identical to it.
Precisely. And analytical idealism aligns strongly with that naturans idea, the fundamental substance, but it makes a crucial move. It identifies that substance not as some unknowable thing, but specifically as consciousness.
Ah, okay. So it takes Spinoza's structure, but defines the foundation as mental, as phenomenal experience.
You've got it. That's a good way to put it.
So if that universal consciousness is the foundation, and the physical world is the dashboard, how does that dashboard work? How do we perceive this seemingly solid external world?
The idea is that our perception of the physical world is an indirect apprehension. It's how this universal consciousness appears to our individual dissociated centers of awareness, our alters.
So, my experience of, say, a table isn't the table in itself, but how the underlying reality presents itself to my consciousness.
Exactly. And the laws of nature, physics, chemistry, what are they in this view?
Good question. If there's no fundamental matter obeying laws,
They're seen as the consistent patterns of behavior within the universal mind. It's habits, if you like.
habits of consciousness.
Consistent dynamics, yes. They operate with this incredible regularity that seems independent of our individual will, because our will is localized within our alter. We're just one whirlpool. We don't control the whole ocean's currents.
Right. My wanting gravity to stop working doesn't affect the larger pattern.
Precisely. Kastrup emphasizes this. Our personal volition doesn't have leverage over these large-scale dynamics.
Okay. What about space and time? They feel so fundamental to our physical reality. Are they part of the dashboard too?
Yes, very much so. This is a core point. Analytical idealism, drawing on neuroscience and philosophy, often argues space and time aren't features of the fundamental reality itself.
Not objectively out there.
No. They are part of the structure of our perception, part of the dashboard, the user interface, constructs of experience.
Like the way a computer desktop uses icons in a space that isn't literally the computer's internal architecture.
That's a great analogy. Donald Hoffman's work touches on this from an evolutionary angle, too. He argues our senses evolved to give us a useful interface for survival, a dashboard, not necessarily a true picture of reality. Fitness trumps truth, evolutionarily speaking.
So our entire experience of a world in space and time might be a species-specific user interface generated by our interaction with this underlying consciousness.
That's the implication. It's a radical shift, really.
It certainly is. What does this do to ideas like meaning and purpose? If the universe isn't just dead matter, if it's fundamentally mental.
Well, that's one of the most profound consequences, proponents argue. If reality is mental, then meaning, which is itself a mental concept, isn't something we just project onto a meaningless void.
It's inherent.
Potentially, yes. Meaning becomes part of the fundamental fabric of existence. Analytical idealism suggests it allows for a recovery of depth, significance, mystery.
So the physical world, even as a representation, gains significance because it's connected to or arises from this deeper conscious ground.
Exactly. It's not just stuff. It's a manifestation of mind. Thinkers like Schopenhauer, even before this specific framework, talked about a fundamental will, an experiential drive underlying the universe's dynamism. That hints at an inherent striving or proto-meaning.
That's a very different feel from a purely materialist perspective, which can sometimes feel quite bleak in terms of inherent meaning.
It is. It aims to restore that sense of intrinsic value and connection.
Now, you have to anticipate objections. This is, well, it's counterintuitive for many. What are the big hurdles people raise?
Sure. One classic one is the private mind's objection. If we're all part of one mind, why can't I read your thoughts? Why does my consciousness feel so private?
Right, the separateness.
And the answer goes back to dissociation. The boundaries created by dissociation between alters are real in terms of experience. They act as, you could say, epistemic barriers.
So the dissociation isn't just metaphorical, it actually prevents direct access between individual streams of thought.
That's the claim. Think about dreaming. Characters in your dream are all generated by your mind, right?
Yeah.
But they usually don't know they're in your dream, and they don't typically have access to each other's minds within the dream narrative. Dissociation creates that separation, even within a single underlying consciousness.
Okay. That dream analogy helps. What about the independence of the physical world? We touched on it with laws of nature, but the world seems so solid, so resistant to my will.
Yeah, I can't just wish this table away.
Exactly.
This goes back to scale and scope. Nature, the physical world as we perceive it, exists within consciousness, yes, but not solely within my personal, individual consciousness.
It's in the universal consciousness.
Yeah. Right. It exists within that broader transpersonal field of consciousness. My individual desires, within my dissociated boundary, don't dictate the behavior of that vast field. It has its own inherent dynamics, its own patterns, the laws of nature.
So it's a consciousness, but it's operating on a level that includes but vastly transcends my individual awareness and control.
Precisely. It accounts for that feeling of objectivity and independence without resorting to fundamental matter.
Are there other ways analytical idealism visualizes how experiences arise within this universal consciousness?
Kastrup uses another helpful analogy from his book, The Universe in Consciousness. He talks about individual experiences being like patterns of self-excitation of cosmic consciousness.
Self-excitation.
Yeah, think of a still lake. The lake itself is the stable underlying universal consciousness.
Okay.
Then thoughts, feelings, perceptions, our individual experiences are like ripples or waves forming on the surface of that lake. They are excitations of the lake itself.
So dynamic patterns happening within a static or stable ground.
Sort of, yeah. The ground is always there, but it expresses itself through these dynamic patterns of excitation, which are our conscious experiences.
That's interesting. Does that connect with anything in, say, physics?
Well, proponents see a striking parallel. In quantum field theory, particles aren't seen as tiny little balls.
Right. They're excitations of quantum fields.
Exactly. An electron is an excitation of the electron field. Photon is an excitation of the electromagnetic field. So you have this fundamental substrate, the field, and particles are just dynamic patterns within it.
And analytical idealism is saying something similar about consciousness. Experiences are excitations of the fundamental field of consciousness.
That's the parallel, yes. It suggests a potential convergence, where what physics describes mathematically as field excitations, metaphysics describes experientially as patterns within universal consciousness.
Quite a connection to draw. It really frames analytical idealism not just as philosophy, but as potentially aligning with fundamental physics.
That's certainly part of the argument some proponents make. It aims for a coherent picture across different domains.
So wrapping this part up, the big takeaway seems to be that analytical idealism presents God, or universal consciousness, not as some separate creator, but as the very fabric of reality itself.
Absolutely. It's not out there or up there. It is the fundamental nature of what is. And we, as individuals, are localized centers of awareness, these alters existing within it.
And our familiar physical world, with its space, time, and objects, is the way this fundamental consciousness appears to us through the dashboard of our perception.
Correct. It's a representation and interface shaped by dissociation and potentially by evolutionary pressures.
It definitely makes you rethink. Well, everything, everyday experience feels different looked at this way.
It really can, which leads us, I think, to a final thought for our listeners to maybe chew on.
Go for it.
If reality truly is fundamentally conscious, if the universe at its heart is mind, how does that change things for you personally? How might that reshape your sense of self, your connection to the world, to other people, your search for meaning? What does it feel like to consider you might be living inside a universal mind?
That's definitely something to ponder.
Yeah.
A universe that's aware, rather than just inert stuff. It shifts the perspective entirely.
It does. And for anyone wanting to go deeper, exploring the works of Kastrup, maybe revisiting Spinoza with this lens, it's a fascinating journey.
Indeed. A lot to think about there. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.